A. Smith Show starts right now.
The Vivid Seats app and enter promo code ESPN25 at checkout to get 10% off your next order. Don't buy just any seat. Get a Vivid Seat. On the line with us right now, as always, every week, every Monday, to start off hour number 2, we have the voice of Monday Night Football for ESPN. The one and only Boogie McFarland is right here. What's up? What's up? What's going on, man? How you doing?
I'm doing good, Stephen A. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing all right, man. I got to ask you first things first. I looked at Cleveland yesterday, and I just said this morning after watching them against the New England Patriots yesterday, I just said this, Booger, they might have all the talent in the world. They might know how to play football as individuals, but as a team, they don't know how to play football. They can't stop committing penalties to save their life. About 70 on the year thus far. What do you make of what you've seen from Cleveland thus far, and how close are you to writing them off?
Well, I think they have a lot of the right ingredients, but they don't know how to put the whole meal together to make one that we all can digest and we all can enjoy. And I think that was the big question mark. At least that was my big concern when the season started, when everybody, anointed them Super Bowl contenders. Vegas had them, whatever the odds were. In this league, you have to learn how to win. That means you got to go through some ups and downs. You got to go through some critical game situations. You have to be able to be in the fire and get hardened and calloused to understand how you're going to perform and how you're going to react. I think they are still a talented team. They've gone through, the toughest part of their schedule. I think they can take a little solace in that. But I think in the end, until you become a team that doesn't beat yourself, regardless of how much talent you have, you're not going to win. The NFL is more about not losing than winning, if you think about that. I mean, sometimes if you just do your job, don't commit penalties, don't turn the ball over, you're going to be in pretty much every single game. And then that's when the talent you have, your special players take over and win you games in the fourth quarter. So I'm not ready to write them off just yet, but I am right on that line where if they lose another game or two, because they still got 9 games left. And I've seen several teams go, 7-2, 8-1, and it's amazing how we'll forget if they do that. So they are teetering on that line where we don't come back from, but I'm not ready to write them off yet.
Have you seen any indication that they're the kind of team that can stop beating themselves?
No, because I think if you look at week 1, they committed, 18 penalties against Tennessee, and they turned the football over. If you look at them yesterday, they committed penalties and turned the football over. So where is the improvement? And I think anytime you're the head coach, it's got to start with you. It's got to start with the accountability. It's got to start with preaching and teaching. Let's do things the right way. And so I'm not in their meeting rooms with Freddie Kitchen, but I know Freddie well enough to know hopefully he is preaching that message. And then at some point, players got to line up and play. Baker Mayfield has got to play. Nick Chubb, who's probably been their most consistent guy all year, he has 2 fumbles yesterday. So they can't win for losing with some of their best players. Now they are committing penalties and turning the football over. So I haven't seen enough. I haven't seen anything that's going to say, hey, next week they're going to do it. But I just know that it's a long season, and I know how we can react and how we can not necessarily jump to conclusions, but we can kind of write a team off too soon. But as I said earlier, I do think they're getting close to the point of no return.
Boogie McFarland, both the New York Giants and the Cleveland Browns have 2 victories apiece in the first 8 weeks of the season. If you're Odell Beckham Jr., where do you wish you were, New York or Cleveland?
Well, I think, Odell, if you ask him in a private moment, he enjoyed New York because not only on the field but off the field kind of fit his personality. I mean, Odell likes to – it's like a lot of young players. They like to be in the action. They like to be where it's happening at, and we all know New York is that place. But I think that did not fit well with this current regime with Pat Sherman and Dave Gettleman. And so as a person, regardless of what profession you're in, you want to go to work where you want it. You want to go to work where somebody enjoys you coming in that door. And I think they genuinely enjoy Odell in Cleveland. So when you look at it that way, I think Odell is where he wants to be because he is wanted in Cleveland. Now, if you gave him the choice, everything being equal, sure, he'd take New York, but everything's not equal because the current regime in New York had kind of grown tired of not necessarily the player, but the limelight that the player wanted.
Booker McFarland right here with Stephen A., ESPN Radio, ESPN News. We saw Drew Brees come back yesterday and obviously throw for over 300 yards. We saw the Saints win a game. But we also saw Aaron Rodgers come to the rescue against Kansas City. We saw San Francisco shellac the Carolina Panthers, led by that defense, led by Nick Bosa, with Kyle Shanahan just schooling the Carolina Panthers in terms of misdirection plays and what have you. Right now, when you look at the NFC, who do you think is standing out above the crowd?
Well, I think you got to start with the 49ers. I think what they're doing, and I said this to you, and I've said it to anyone that will listen, they have a formula that will travel anywhere, anytime, against anybody. They can rush the pass with 4 guys, they can stop the run, and they can run the football. That'll play in any stadium, any weather, in any conference. It doesn't matter. So I think they are the most complete team in the NFC, followed closely by the New Orleans Saints. I think now that Drew Brees is back, the Saints defense is quietly playing lights out. I would probably put the Saints as my number 2 team in the NFC, and then I put the Green Bay Packers. And then, once you get past the Packers, then I think you got a lot of good teams. But I think those 3 teams have separated themselves on the NFC side. And when you get into that kind of that second tier, now you're in the Philadelphia, Minnesota, the Rams, like all those teams that have talent, and they could very easily be in that upper tier, but for whatever reason, they haven't performed consistently enough as the 3 teams I mentioned when you talk about, the 49ers. And, Seattle is right there. I want to see what Seattle does from a standpoint when the run is shut down. Russell Wilson is playing at the MVP level, but he hasn't had to carry the load as far as throwing it 40 or 50 times. So I want to see him in that level. But all of those teams have what it takes to win a Super Bowl, Stephen A. It's just that right now I think that the 49ers, led by that defensive line, and Nick Bosa, who has been absolutely phenomenal, probably should be a defensive player of the year candidate. Not just a rookie.
7 sacks in 7 games. 7 sacks in 7 games.
And he's not going to be able to, it's not like you can say, let's double team him, because you got D4, you got DeForest Buckner, you got, Eric Armstead. So even though he is dominating, you can't just cheat on him because the other guys will burn you. So I think that's going to continue for him. But I love what the 49ers are doing. Anywhere, anytime, in any weather, Stephen A., they can play anybody, and it doesn't matter.
So what's the real reason you're holding them a step above New Orleans? Because when I think about New Orleans, I use Drew Brees, and I compare that to Jimmy Garoppolo. Obviously, you're looking at the formula that the San Francisco 49ers employ, and you're basically saying they can take that anywhere, but the New Orleans Saints can't. Why is that?
Well, I'm going to take the better defense. I got burned a few years ago. You remember that Super Bowl when Denver and Peyton Manning went against Seattle?
Oh, yes.
And everyone said
an annihilation.
Said that, and everyone was like, offense is taking over the league, and can Peyton Manning score 30 or 40 against the Legion of Boom? And they just choked them and shut them out. That taught me a valuable lesson that in this league and in sports in general, good pitching beats good hitting, good defense beats good offense. And I think the 49ers had a better defense. So I would take the 49ers, even though Jimmy Garoppolo hasn't been consistent enough for me, even though there are still questions. If you look at the weak link, quote unquote, the weakest link of that team, it's still what can the quarterback do when the game is put on him. I still think that defense and how they run the football, I would take them over New Orleans, Seattle, Chicago, Philadelphia, Green Bay. I would take them over all those teams because of that defense, even though those other teams have better quarterbacks with Aaron Rodgers and Drew Brees and Russell Wilson. There's no question. They are better at quarterback than Jimmy Garoppolo. But if you look at what Kyle Shanahan has done, they are a run-first team. And with the play action off of that, Jimmy Garoppolo gets to throw against some premier looks in football, and I think he is talented enough to do that. He's just got to continue to improve and be more consistent.
What are your thoughts about the NFC East, particularly after seeing the Eagles manhandle the Buffalo Bills yesterday in this move within a half game of the Dallas Cowboys? What are your thoughts about what you saw yesterday? What are your thoughts about what you see for any threat coming out of the NFC East?
Maybe the biggest win of Carson Wentz's career yesterday. Just if you look at the situation and all the noise coming out of Philadelphia and what Orlando Scandrick said, and I don't buy into all the conspiracy theories, but I do believe where there's smoke, there's some fire. It may not be a big fire, but there's something going on there. And I think for that team to come out and do what they did yesterday was really big for Carson Wentz to play that way. But, I mean, if you look at what the Dallas Cowboys did to the Eagles on Sunday night, don't we have to lean toward the Dallas Cowboys? I mean, don't we have to say that the Cowboys are still the best team in the NFC East, even though the Eagles may be more talented? But we're learning in sports, the most talented team, Cleveland Browns, doesn't always win. It's how you play and how you gel as a team. So I'm going to lean toward the Cowboys right now.
But, Booger, what do you make of what Orlando Scandrick said about his now former team, the Philadelphia Eagles, how they were still living off the Super Bowl from a couple of years ago? What did you make of that?
Well, I think that's his opinion, and for whatever happened in that locker room helped him form that opinion. But I do know this. When you win a Super Bowl, it can be both a gift and a curse, because it's a gift for everything that comes with it. But sometimes, you know, when you're struggling, you think that switch is going to automatically turn on. And I think we realize that Philadelphia is a flawed team, especially in the secondary. And, you know, Howie Roseman, he's a very, very good GM. I think he's going to make a move to help them out there in the secondary. But it wouldn't surprise me if some of the guys may have been just kind of waiting to flip the proverbial switch. I can't either confirm or deny what Orlando Scandrick was talking about in the locker room as far as specific incidents where guys were doing that. But it's just human nature when you do win a Super Bowl and you win it in the fashion in which they did with the backup quarterback, the expectations become higher when the guy who was leading the MVP candidacy when he got hurt, Carson Wentz, comes back. So they got to learn to win with this guy and not with Nick Foles. And that's just, I mean, that's learning and that's growing. And I think they'll be fine with that.
Booger, real quickly, are we having this kind of conversation about the Eagles if Deshaun Jackson is healthy?
I think it would look different because I think Deshaun Jackson brings the element that I would hope that Nelson Aguilar could bring, which is a deep threat. But for whatever reason, you know, when Deshaun Jackson was in the lineup early in the season, especially against Washington, they're throwing the ball deep. I think Nelson can do the same thing, but for whatever reason, the chemistry between Nelson and Carson sometimes seems a little off. I do think when Jackson gets back, the offense is going to open back up. But they got enough weapons, man, with Goddard and Ertz and Aguilar and Jefferson. I mean, they got and Sanders. There's plenty of weapons there. It's not like they are lacking for weapons.
Gotcha.
They just got to go out and get it done.
Booger McFarland right here with Stephen A., ESPN Radio, ESPN News, the voice of Monday Night Football in Pittsburgh tonight. Miami Dolphins taking on the Pittsburgh Steelers Monday Night Football. You can check out Booger with my man Joe Tessitore this evening for the Monday Night Football encounter. Let's stay within the NFC for a couple of more questions. The Chicago Bears, Matt Nagy, Mitchell Trubisky clearly wasn't that impressive, but he did move them within field goal range, albeit with his legs instead of his arms, and got Pinheiro in a position to kick a game-winning field goal. Once again, another kicker has failed the Chicago Bears, and things are looking very, very suspect in Chi-Town right now. What do you make of their situation real quickly? What can Nagy do?
Well, I think Nagy has got to continue to try to build around the strengths of Mr. Trubisky, which is his athleticism, his ability to move around in the pocket and outside the pocket and create plays that way. They also got to run the football better in Chicago. You know, everybody is ragging on Matt Nagy today about the fact that he took a knee and, you know, didn't try to advance the ball, whether running or throwing, to improve the field goal range.
Shouldn't they have?
Well, Steve, okay, let me ask you this. Who knows Mr. Trubisky better than any of us? Matt Nagy, right? So Matt Nagy, who knows his quarterback and knows not only his strengths but his weaknesses, is basically giving us a glimpse into who he is. He's basically saying, you know what?
I don't believe in him.
He's saying I don't trust him in the moment. He's not saying I don't believe in him. He's saying I don't trust him right now, or I don't want to put him in a position to make him make a decision that's going to thwart everything that we have done today. So I feel like we're in good enough position with a 40-yard field goal that our kicker has made this with his eyes closed that he can make it. So I don't want to take the risk. He's looking at the risk versus the reward, and he's not willing to take the risk. And he knows the quarterback better than anyone. And so I think what we're basically saying, while we're criticizing Matt Nagy, we're basically criticizing Mitch Trubisky, because Matt Nagy is not trying to lose the game on purpose. Like, that's dumb to think. He's trying to protect and win the game the way that he knows how, which is protecting the quarterback that may not be ready to handle making a decision in a win or lose moment like that. And so I don't criticize Nagy. I criticize where Mitch Trubisky is in his development, and they got to continue to get him better. They're missing Akeem Hicks on the defensive side of the ball. And a Chicago defense that we once thought was the best in football is now, I mean, dare I say it, they're mediocre. And because they aren't dominating the way they were early in the season. And some of that's to do with the offense. Because when you're on the field a lot as a defensive player, man, ain't but so much you can do over and over. Like, you can't just keep going out there getting 3 and out, and you got to go right back out there in 3 or 4 plays. Yep. So as a team, they got to play better together and complement each other.
Boogie McFarland right here with Stephen A. ESPN Radio, ESPN News. Let's transition to the AFC because something, an aberration, an anomaly, whatever word is appropriate for it, transpired yesterday in the aftermath of Denver's 15-13 loss to Indianapolis Colts. We saw Joe Flacco, the relatively quiet, demure Joe Flacco, albeit a Super Bowl champion, somebody that isn't known for speaking out, basically accusing his coaches, Vic Fangio and others, of being scared to lose. I mean, that's essentially what he said, and he was very outspoken in the aftermath of their 15-13 loss to Indy. What did you make of that yesterday?
A man that doesn't say a lot of words when he speaks them, they are powerful, right? I mean, that's what Joe Flacco said. He basically gave you a glimpse into not only what he was thinking, but probably what some guys in their locker room are whispering. And I agree with him. You know, sometimes as a defensive coach, you can be confused or you can be criticized of being too conservative. And I think Coach Fangio, if you ask him in a private moment, he would probably tell you he took the conservative play instead of the risky play, and it cost him. And all Joe Flacco is saying, hey, why are we being so conservative? What are we preserving? What are we scared for? Like, we are going nowhere in a hurry, so we should be taking more risk, not being more conservative. And I agree with him, and I think it's going to speak volumes, not just in the words that he said, but I guarantee you Coach Fangio is going to have, whether it be in the team meeting room or whether it be in one-on-one in his office, he's going to have a moment with Joe Flacco where they have a conversation. And I think it's going to be a productive conversation. And I would love to know the outcome of that. And I would love to ask him at some point, because Vic Fangio is a no-nonsense guy. Like, he's not going to just look at that and say, don't worry about it. He's going to confront Joe. And hopefully it's a positive moment for the team where they can learn from it.
Look at McFarland right here with Stephen A. ESPN Radio, ESPN News. J.J. Watt is down. He's out for the season with the pec tear. Jadeveon Clowney has been gone, traded to Seattle. But Deshaun Watson is still finding a way to keep the Houston Texans competitive. In light of what they've lost now in J.J. Watt, where do you see their season ending up?
I think you have to look at them as they are a contender. They're winning to Kansas City. When Mahomes was healthy, I mean, he might have been hobbled a little bit, but he was on the field. And in this league, when you're on the field, that's how we view you. And they beat the Kansas City Chiefs. So you got to look at them as a viable contender. And I realize no Clowney. I realize no Watt now. Hope he gets better soon because the league needs him. He's one of the great ambassadors for our league. But Deshaun Watson is doing things that we've only seen from like certain players in small snippets. But Dabo Swinney tried to tell us this, though, Stephen. He said he's Michael Jordan. And, you know, we saw a little glimpse of it his rookie year, and then he got hurt in the ACL. He came back last year, took the team to the postseason. But right now his game is going to another level. And as long as Hopkins and Fuller and Kiki QT and some of the guys stay healthy, Houston is going to be a tough out because Watson is the real deal. He is on the short list of MVP candidates along with Russell Wilson and Christian McCaffrey and Mahomes if he can come back soon. Like, those guys are right there together, and you gotta feel really good about what he's doing because of some of the criticism he took, some of the criticism that people gave him. Like, he is playing at a really, really high level.
Before I let you get on out of here, I don't know which storyline is best to peel from with tonight's Monday night encounter between the Miami Dolphins and the Pittsburgh Steelers. It's one of the two. Who has a better chance of going winless this season, Miami or Cincinnati? Or do the Pittsburgh Steelers really, really have a viable chance of representing the AFC North in the postseason? What are your thoughts? Which storyline is the better one, the more plausible one per se?
Yeah, I'm going with the latter, Stephen A. Because as Wolf Blitzer says on CNN, I can see a clear path to Pittsburgh getting to 500. I mean, you beat Miami tonight, and then you have a game versus Indianapolis to get to 500. And so at the halfway point, they would be 4-4 with 8 games left, and Mike Tomlin, who is one hell of a coach, can take it. And this team hasn't quit. This team is playing hard. I can clearly see a path to being 4-4 at the halfway point, and then all bets are back on for the Steelers.
Booker McFarland right here with Stephen A., ESPN Radio, ESPN News. Always appreciate you, my brother. Thanks a lot. Enjoy tonight's game. You know I'll be watching, and I will be listening.
Anytime. Thanks, Stephen A. Take it easy, buddy.
Take it easy. The one and only Booker McFarland, the voice of Monday Night Football with my buddy Joe Tessitore. Check him out tonight, Monday Night Football, 8:15 p.m. Eastern Time, kickoff time. Make sure you don't miss it. Stephen A. right here, ESPN Radio, ESPN News 888-SAY, ESPN, it's 888-729-3776. We'll get back to your calls and more in just a minute. Don't touch that dial. Plus, I got some stuff to say about an atrocity taking place in the National Basketball Association. I'll explain exactly what I'm talking about in just a minute, so don't touch that dial. It's the Stephen A. Smith Show, ESPN Radio, ESPN News. Actually, a couple of atrocities. Anyway, do you have frequent heartburn and acid stashed everywhere in case it pops up? Well, now you can experience what zero heartburn feels like by joining the Prilosec